You have reached the Geek Elite. Good luck.
In my lifetime, I expect to see 3, 4, perhaps even more women on the High Court bench. Women not shaped from the same mold, but of different complexions.
Welcome back to United States of Women, the Geek Elite Media podcast, where each season we take a different state and we tell you about 8 amazing women who, if you haven't heard of them, you've most likely heard of their accomplishments.
Yep.
So I'm Elizabeth, and I'm joined by the Jubaltastic Jessica.
Thank you, Shakespeare.
Thank you. This is our final episode of season 3 in New Jersey. So episode 8. This one's, we're titling A Heady Young Woman.
Okay.
And that is a direct quote. Well, not a direct quote, but it is a summation of a direct quote from our individual.
Okay.
So I typically like to, as some people have probably noticed, some of our listeners have noticed, I like to start with the woman who was born first and then work our way to the present throughout the season.
Yeah.
So this is our most contemporaneous to us.
Okay.
And actually, she was in fact still alive while we were alive.
Oh, okay.
Right? Today's woman is Paula Kassell.
Cool name.
Right? Paula was born December 5th, 1917 in New York City.
Hey, December baby.
December baby. She was the younger of 2 girls. Her dad was a self-taught stockbroker.
Wow.
Right? And they moved from Yonkers, New York they moved to Yonkers, New York from New York City at the age of, when Paula was 6. She attended Yonkers High School. And growing up, her mom basically voluntold, encouraged, it's unclear, had her volunteer at a Jewish home for the blind near where they lived. Okay. So she would read to blind children, help teach them how to read, all of those things. In a very unique move for the time period, Paula's dad insisted that both of his daughters would go to college. Period. End of subject.
Cool.
Right? So both of the sisters attended Barnard College, where Paula graduated in 1939 with dual degrees in psychology and sociology.
Woohoo! That's what I did.
Thought you might find this interesting. She claims that her time at Barnard College was the birth of her feminist consciousness.
That's what college usually does to somebody.
And her quote is, "Such a place with its activism and push for drive was a heady place for a young woman to be."
I see.
So, a heady young woman. On August 6th, she then briefly worked for the Yonkers Relief Department as a social worker.
Okay.
In 1941, she married Garrison Friedman, keeping her maiden name, and they moved to Dover, New Jersey, which is how she gets the connection to New Jersey.
Okay.
Her quote on this one is, "Although marriages can never truly be equal in today's society, mine was among the most feminist."
Alrighty.
Yeah, she is our as you'll come to see, she was full bore into this, what is considered the second wave of feminism during her lifetime. They would have 2 children, which she would raise. In 1955, after her youngest graduated high school, or after her youngest was old enough, she rejoined the workforce, joining the telephone company Bell Labs.
Ooh.
In a unique twist from what was common at the time, she actually reached middle management at the company, but decided to leave after multiple times of being passed over for promotions beyond that. She was not so interested. In 1966, she joined the National Organization for Women, known as NOW, and established the chapter for what is now Morris County in New Jersey. She was active in NOW until her death. So she's always been involved. In fact, one of the major citations is the Morris County, New Jersey NOW chapter's article on her commemorating her death. Because this is the one episode where Wikipedia kind of failed me. But that's okay. Paula still had some awesome information out there. The next big piece, and where our topic comes from, is in 1971. She organized a conference along with Marge Wingarden in New Jersey, which they called the New Directions for Women Conference. To get, it ended up with 350 participants.
Okay.
At the Fairleigh Dickinson University in Madison, New Jersey. It was held on May 1971. During that conference, it was determined that what was needed was a periodical that focused on women's issues. So, collecting $200 from the participants, the publication was born, and Kassell served as its editor-in-chief because she had previously done some journalism and had written articles. So she became,
everybody writes articles in college.
right.
Yeah.
So she started the newspaper, and it was originally published out of her home. But by March of 1973, the publication had reached 50,000
Wow.
prints per run. And it was the country's first statewide feminist newspaper. So, New Directions for Women is our topic because I think it's awesome. And while now the National Organization for Women is still in existence and highly recognized, New Directions for Women in New Jersey was really important. There's not a lot on it, surprisingly, which was really kind of interesting. New Directions for Women was deemed a no-nonsense reportage from a feminist perspective.
Okay.
Is what it was considered as. The archive that houses all of its publications describes the paper as the paper filled a need for no-nonsense reportage from a feminist perspective at a time when women's issues were not regularly or fairly covered in mainstream press. It ran state, national, and international news stories, book reviews, women's histories articles, and editorials. It began as a mimeographed sheet, so just a single sheet, but quickly grew to a tabloid-sized quarterly publication. So,
Okay.
right? It was published between its founding in 1971 with $240 till 1993 when it finally stopped publishing because it never really reached financial stability.
Still, it's a good run.
Right? Still a very good run. Paula served as its director until 1977 when the newspaper relocated to its headquarters in Westwood, New Jersey, at which point, because she did not want to leave Dover, she became the assistant editor,
Okay.
where she remained until it closed down. In 1972, Paula helped head and coordinate a NOW conference, a National Organization for Women conference, for unions and employers regarding the Title VII of the Civil Rights Act on sex discrimination. She promoted it and forced it so well that they ended up with 150 delegates from unions and employers.
Wow.
Right? The next big the next big piece in her professional occurred in 1968. And this is the part of her story that I'm like, you go, girl. So in 1968, Paula Kassell bought 10 shares of the New York Times stock.
Okay.
For the express purpose of being permitted into the stockholders meeting.
Yeah.
Where she raised for debate the introduction of the honorific MS for women who were married but did not take their husband's last names.
All right.
And she had that argument with the editor-in-chief for the New York Times at the time, Schulzberg.
Okay.
Where he specifically, when she raised the issue, he retorted back, Mrs. Kassell, my understanding is your daughter recently got married and did not take her husband's last name. So is she Mrs. or Miss? MISS. And Paula replied, that's the problem. I don't know. I've been confused about it myself. Mm-hmm. The addition of the MS honorific had been a fight throughout the 1970s by the Women's Journalists Association, particularly at the New York Times, for over a decade, and they had been unable to get it through. After her discussion with Schulzberg on the stockholder floor, that same year, the New York Times introduced the honorific MS. With an editorial discussion regarding the change in language. I almost considered doing honorifics as our topic for today, but quite honestly, it is so freaking conflicting that I was like, I don't know. Although interesting, side note for audience members, the honorific MX can be used for any and all genders, including it is the only non-gender specific honorific MX.
So non-gender binary. Okay, cool.
It is non-binary. So for those who do not associate with a gender, theys and thems, you can use the honorific MX for formal invitations.
I didn't know that. Now, is MX probably not available on forms that you fill out on the internet yet or anything?
No, not really.
Okay. All right. Let's go before Congress. No, just kidding.
Next step.
Yeah, next step. But that's cool. I didn't know there was one. So MX.
Yeah. The part that nobody knew when she made that debut on the New York Times stockholders floor was the fact that her husband had died 6 days before.
Oh.
But in interviews regarding that topic afterwards, she made the statement that her husband was a feminist and she knew that this was an important enough issue that she could put aside her grief and fight on.
Oh.
In particular, what the articles have attributed to her success in that New York Times battle and in all of the other battles that she pursued in moving equal rights of women forward was the fact that she strictly focused on logical explanations and arguments. So, for instance, in the New York Times, much of her argument for the introduction of the MS was the fact that more and more women are keeping their maiden names, and Mrs. would not be appropriate because Mrs. would be their mother-in-law.
Mother-in-law, yeah.
Whereas Miss would not be appropriate because they are in fact married. So for the very logical reason that you have a category of women who need an honorific and the two current honorifics do not apply, MS needs to be introduced. So no discussion regarding, what would at the time be considered, emotional pleas for equality. It was just a very logical, straightforward, there is confusion in your printed newspaper because you do not have an honorific appropriate for this category. You need to fix that. Irrelevant.
Look, it uses less letters than both of those. It's like the same amount of letters as Mr. So there you go.
There you go. After the closing of the New Directions for Women publication in 1993, Paula then went on to create an index of every article the newspaper ever ran.
Wow.
By subject.
Oh.
So that it could be found, because she was concerned that there was still a need for feminist-centric research and historical documentation. These indexes and all of the newspaper articles can be found at Ohio State, York University in Toronto, and Rutgers. Paula passed away, still a member of the Morris County, New Jersey chapter of NOW, on August 20th, 2012, after successful hospice care. Her obituary ran in the New York Times, which just, to me, brings it full circle. It's fantastic.
As MS.
As MS. Citations for this week's episode. Her Wikipedia page, unfortunately, was just so short.
Like 2 paragraphs.
Like it was, and I think that's because she was still alive till 2012.
She's fairly recent, so we don't have a lot of papers on her or anything.
Yep. But the New Jersey Women's History does have a decent article on it. The best articles I have found were from the Morris County Now chapter, who did a article on her that ran in 2008, womensnews.org. An article by Betsy Wade on December 6, 2002. Which is definitely the most in-depth on that. And maybe she should update the Wikipedia page. New Directions for Women, the actual newspaper, there is almost everything that I was able to find on it was through Paula Kassell's information. Like, it was really hard to find anything separate from them. It does have a Wikipedia entry, but it is 4 sentences.
Yeah.
And it's basically about the fact that Paula Kassell founded it. And
you can't even find any like examples of articles from it or anything?
No, there are exactly 2 references. Records of New Directions for Women, PDF, which is just that index that Paula created. And an article entitled Paula Kassell, Feminist Pioneer and Dover Resident, Dies at 94, from Kara Townsend, which is just her obit in one of the local Dover newspapers. Like, that's it. That's all there is.
Does paper just disappear?
Pretty much, despite the fact that, like, for all intents and purposes, it was expansive when it was at its height.
It lasted 20 years, right? 20? 70 to 90 something?
71 to 93, yeah, 20 years.
20 years. Cool.
Published quarterly. It was the first statewide, it was published nationally and in Canada. It had readerships all across.
We'll have to go to, some library somewhere, probably.
Rutgers University probably has.
Yeah, there we go.
Some information.
There you go. Let's book a plane ticket.
Let's just book a plane ticket.
Let's just go.
I mean, COVID is still a thing, Jessica. I don't know how to tell you this. I know you've been vaccinated, but the rest of us still are trying.
Yeah, that's true. Good luck.
Actually, by the time this comes out, I will have had my first vaccine.
Yay!
So that is Paula Kassell, a heady young woman. I loved that. Some of her quotes from the interviews with her are just hysterical. She clearly had a great sense of humor. But Jessica, if people want to send you travel plans to New Jersey, where can they find you?
Yes, you can find me on Twitter as JM Bailey Writes.
Awesome. And you can find me with the rest of Geek Elite Media at Geek Elite Media and our Facebook page /Geek Elite Media. Archived episodes of this podcast and other podcasts can be found on our website, geekelitemedia.com. That pause was there for the fact that I realized we did not talk about what our next state's going to be next season.
Oh, yes, the 4th ratified state.
The 4th ratified state of Georgia.
Georgia.
We're going to be talking about 8 lovely Georgia peaches. which Jessica's a little concerned about it.
Yeah,
I mean,
they are currently going back into the past.
Yeah, I still have hope for Georgia. We'll try and brighten everybody's perspective on Georgia, or Georgia's future at least.
Yes, the women that are still fighting in Georgia right now.
Exactly. So please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to us wherever you get this podcast, and join us back here for next season in Georgia. But until next time, this is the ladies from the United States of Women of the Geek Elite Media Network saying always remember to geek out.
This concludes our broadcast.